Psychotechnologies live.
Woo! So this psychotech is very special psychotech. Apparently, my wife told me apparently this is from a TV show called Clone High,
Oh,
where they do a very special episode of Clone High, but they do it every week.
right.
May have subconsciously,
We've drawn it in.
yeah.
Okay.
This one, yeah. So this is actually a special one. I'm going to tell you the story of this episode. So this episode is about stories. And earlier we were talking about stories, and we decided that we were going to do an episode on stories.
Right.
So this is the story of the
Oh my
episode.
god. We've gone meta. Oh no. Are we inside the story or are we outside the story? God, I'm inside the story already. It's too late. Save yourself.
That is exactly right. And the audience listening knows that they also get trapped in stories that get interwoven or intertwixt with other what does intertwixt mean? I actually don't know what it means.
Intertwined.
I don't know, but it's like a special thing like our people use. It's a term our people use. They use intertwixt.
When you say our people, who do you mean by our people?
So
particularly in this moment.
Yeah, so this is an interesting question because I said our people. Mm-hmm. And I'm kind of drawing on stories that already exist like within us. And I'm assuming that we have a shared narrative of our people, at least to a certain degree that this makes sense.
Right, but like which people? Is it the post-rat Twitter, or is it the what?
Post-rats.
The post-rats. So the psychotechnologists.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Our people, the psychotechnologists.
Our people, the psychotechnologists.
Use the story weaving with us.
Yeah, they use the term intertwixt, which carries with it much weight in history and
intertwixt.
Meaning, and I use it, but I don't actually know what it means.
It has no definition. It's like intertwined, I guess. Yeah, nothing. Google doesn't intertwixt. All right. So this is a story where we are intertwixt. I would use the phrase. There's a word interpenetrative, which is so like you're in, and then you're also
like what gay people do. Sorry, lowbrow humor.
Using that word on stream.
I'm sorry. You know what I mean.
Well, when doing therapy, when doing psychological work with someone, often I'm the therapist and they're the client. There's like this relationship, right? And so then in their mind, there's like this instance of therapist and client relationship. And I'm like working on that one and making sure that where our relationship, so I'm out here having this like therapist client relationship, and I'm working on making sure the therapist client relationship that they imagine is a good relationship, so that they can like in that there's a client having like a good time with the therapist client relationship. So there's this like holographic fractal like interrelation feedback.
So it's like relationships inside relationships or stories inside stories.
Right.
So they're having a story of they have a problem, they're going to a therapist. And so you need to like work on their story level of like what's happening in their life, what's happening right now as you and the therapist, what's happening between you two as human beings coexisting in the same place at the same time together. And then even within their stories of their life, they're going to have people telling them stories.
Right. And we know that everyone's the hero of their own story. So it's just don't fight that and let them take the heroic frame on their own journey. Like no one wants to be the loser, and so you're not going to believe you're the loser unless like strategically gets you what you want. So everyone's the hero of their own story. That's what they believe.
Yeah.
And so you kind of got to work with it as a therapeutic support. You need to work with the hero version of them, even if they seem like they're in the dumps.
Yeah. Yeah. And so you got all these levels of stories that you're kind of managing and crisscrossing, and you got to be careful which words you use and associations and so let's talk about stories.
No, we're in the story already, Daniel.
Yeah, we're in the story talking about stories,
Right.
explaining stories, talking about stories now.
Okay. Okay. So stories. So I was saying just a moment ago that I kind of there's this dichotomy between the word cells and the shape rotators.
Yeah, this is a story that's like super popular on Twitter now, and I don't really get it.
I'm
And
excited by
like I kind of get it, but I don't get why it's so interesting. It seems kind of lame. It
that.
seems like very like 10 years ago, this would have been really interesting.
I think it's really funny because it's like it's an insult to both sides. Like I get really excited about like uh statements, constructs, concepts that depending on which side you are, you'll see it differently.
Mm-hmm.
Like, for example, if you make a bad joke about how humans are failing climate change, the left might like freak out and get mad at it, and the right will be like, yeah, that's true. We are failing at that. And so the effect that you have is defined by where someone else is on the political spectrum.
Yeah,
And
I
so
love that
people are sort of
too.
choosing their own world within my world. I really enjoy being able to like, and then I get to filter for the people who are choosing the better possible world within my world. And they're going to stay, and the people who are choosing the worst possible world are kind of going to leave.
Yeah, and then you can also see who's like popping out and who like gets it.
Right. Right.
Who
Right.
gets it? It's like a not an optical illusion, but like an intellectual illusion.
Right.
And
So,
then yeah.
so like word cells and shape rotators, like the word cells are like, we use the words, we're the cool ones. And except that the word cell is kind of an insult to word cells because it's like an incel but for words. And the shape rotators are like, we're the ones who rotate shapes in our heads. And to the word cells, that's an insult to shape rotators. But to shape rotators, that's just a compliment. You're really good at shape rotating.
Yeah, it's like you're dumb, but like you're like actually doing what you like. You're in touch with reality versus like word cells are almost like
Well, it's kind of got like this mathy computery twist to it. It's not just reality, it's the mathy computery reality, engineering reality.
yeah. I always see it as like, oh, I rotate shapes.
Right.
Like Moose from Archie
Right.
Comics.
There's a tweet somewhere else of like, you can just rotate a cow in your mind and it's free. Like you can do that anytime you like.
Yeah.
And that feels like it connects to me, for me, to the shape rotating. You can just turn a cow around.
What, a cow?
A cow in your mind's eye. Yep. You can just rotate cows and no one can stop you. Feel empowered because you can rotate a cow. Anyway, word cells and shape rotators. So word cells will look at word cell versus shape rotator and be like, we're insulting both parties. And shape rotators will look at it and go, we're insulting word cells and shape rotators are great. So it's like the story like sorts itself into like people who will like and people who won't like it. But it's also like a little bit self-aware as to that it's doing that.
And then word cells are just people that are like good with words. Like I don't even get how that works. Like how do you be good with words without shape rotation?
Right. So I have a hunch. My hunch is there's the concrete reality, like the bottom up reality, and then there's the top down reality, which is the labels and the narrative and the way that semantic webs meet each other. And it's sort of like, if you go predictive processing as a model, they meet in the middle, and like we're in this messy world that's kind of both. But practically speaking, the word cells are just coming at reality from a different angle. Like reality is more what we can name about it than it is what it is without the names. Whereas
sort of like in science, you can have like taxonomy versus experimentation.
right.
Yeah.
So I come from the like meditative.
Taxonomy is really like kind of important to things.
Right. Word cells are still important to the natural order of reality.
Yeah. Yeah, and I feel like some people.
This is why we're here. We're here in saying stories can be very powerful.
Yeah.
Stories can.
Well, no, I think I guess taxonomy itself is a story.
Right.
And it's just like kind of a boring one to some extent. Or not necessarily true, but like the foundations of whatever you're taxifying is going to have like be a story. right? This is actually really interesting because like nowadays we like to, the scientists have kind of taken over in a lot of ways, and so a lot of like how we name or how species work or how we engage with species is really by like genetic history. And so they have like the story of evolution and evolve through time and genetics and stuff. And I find like most of the time I don't really care about it that. Mostly what's interesting to me when I'm trying to understand stuff is like niches in ecosystems are more interesting to me than actually the genetics. So to me, like a hummingbird and a bee are very similar.
Right.
Even though a hummingbird, a bee, and like a wasp, like these are all very similar, but like genetically, they're not. Like they're very different.
Because of how they interrelate with their ecosystem.
Yeah, because like what do they actually do in their lives? Like what's the purpose? Like how do they relate to things? It's very similar, right? But versus like a hummingbird versus like a hawk is just, they're just so different. Like they're not like but like, oh, they're both birds, but these are insects and versus birds. Like, so insects, like birds are more like insects than they are. And then there's like a bunch of other ones where like birds versus reptiles, like is there a distinction, right? Like this whole movement to like get rid of reptiles or amphibians, whatever. Like there's all these like weird things that they do. And they do it because, well, genetically there are similarities, and like, the geneticists want to classify things by genetic, and normal people want to class things by how you're going to relate to them or
how they look or
how they look.
The rationality community has a semantic web diagram that sort of like, I think it was they used a chair as an example. Like the way our mental map works, we have both the central object of the phenomena, like the most chair-like chair, and we have the qualities. So chairs have legs, chairs have backs, chairs have seats, chairs have
it's
all
like
these
Aristotle's like perfect or whatever.
Right.
Ideal.
And it's not that a chair definitely has to have legs, because a beanbag is a chair that doesn't have legs. And it's not that everything with legs has chairs, because penguins have legs and they're not they're not beanbags or chairs at all. So it's sort of like this mix between the two, where sometimes it's the things on the semantic qualities, and sometimes it's the thing in the center, and it's just this mishmash that we know what things are by their qualities and their how central they are to the category. And another example is like, what is a bird? And a common bird is like a pigeon or a seagull or a chicken. And then if we're like, okay, but penguins are birds and so are ostriches. They're not central birds, but they definitely got the bird-like qualities.
Yeah.
So anyway,
I think because we tend to use the genetic, like, so it's like it's got and lays eggs,
right?
Something that the main qualities,
right? Anyway,
and that does account for most birds.
Well, that's also valuable because historically, the lineage of our existence comes through a genetic pattern.
Yeah. And so this is the story that, this is a story that we have, that we tell ourselves, that we do research to find out if it's true and how accurate it is and all that. And I'm not knocking that as a story for sure. Like, if nobody did that story, then I would be like, dude, we need to get on this and figure out the story. But yeah, like it's the only story that we can tell ourselves.
I was talking to someone a couple of days ago and talking about the story of science. And the story of science is like pre-framed in determinism. Like the universe is atoms floating around that sort of bump into each other. And then within that pre-frame, we build out the evidence that, we learn about atoms and that atoms bump into each other. But it's like we wrote the conclusion on that before we found out those details. And then we taught those details within the context of that conclusion. And so science leads to determinism.
Wait, what do you mean? Let's
So
just start a little.
start
So
off-
like we decided that things work a certain way, and then we figured out how they work. And
well, we decided that the universe was determinist, right?
yeah, so like determinism, like if you're meaning determinism very specifically as in like no random chance, I think like that's not true from modern day physics.
Well, it's built on to this moment right now is built on 1 moment ago, right? That's
Yeah.
so if you can plot all of the atoms a moment ago, you could plot all of the atoms in this moment and in the next moment.
Well, that's not technically true in the sense that there is some randomness, and there is like when you get to quantum mechanics, things get weird.
Well, this is Schrodinger stuff. If you could,
Yeah.
the location and speed, right, are in superposition with each other. You can't know both the perfect location of an atom and its current movement speed.
Yeah.
You could predict everything.
Yeah. Well, you can't, he's saying.
No, he was saying, but we can't, and so we can't predict everything. So the universe is inherently chaotic and is unpredictable.
Well, that would make it unknowable.
Right.
But I think there is also an element of randomness to certain subatomic particles. And I don't know how like accepted or whatever, like I did study this, but I didn't get like far because it's actually really hard. So but like there is some of the things are at least claim that it's proven that there is randomness in the work.
Right. So when I was talking to this person, I was talking about like my base scientific worldview is like the world is mostly determined. Like you're right, everything's actually random, but my model says everything is determined, determinable, predictable. Like most of science is particularly the non-biological. Like I send a particle this way and it bumps into that one. Chemistry, I mix
everything from like atomic to stellar is essentially predictable. So like black holes get weird, but like if you're dealing on anything like smaller than stars, let's say maybe like the size of planets or something, like from atoms to planets, everything there is kind of determinable.
Right. And also like things that go like biological get very complicated, and so we don't really know how they work yet.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of emergent properties and interactions that are
right,
possibly uncalculable.
Right, and even emergent properties are like that's a story. Like, what if I were to posit there's some invisible force there that we haven't yet discovered scientifically that is actually determining things, and it's not just emergent, there's actually another force going on. Like,
so I think that's what we used to do, right? Like with angels and stuff like that. Like I think people did do that because at the time that probably would have been the parsimonious explanation.
Well, they
like making up multiple forces. And then science kind of came along and was like, actually, everything is explainable from these 4 fundamental forces.
Well, at least much more was explainable than we had at the time. Why did the crops?
They postulate that everything.
Why did it not rain this year? Like, actually, that's way more explainable than we realized.
Yeah.
So
yeah, and then even then with us, like even those, like you have certain levels, like you'll have like hurricanes, like you're not plotting atoms, you're plotting
general wind forces. I don't really know how weather is.
Yeah, but you're still using the same concept. Like you're still using vectors, and still using force and topography, I guess, and geometry, whatever.
Right. We're proposing that the force of the wind is based on geometry in the same way that the force of how to build a house is based on the same geometry.
Yeah. Well, yeah, like it's the same branch of, let's say, even the same branch of science, which science is the same branch of, like geometry. Like geometry would be like from math, right? And then math is a bunch of different things together, but like everything kind of goes together, right? So like no math should contradict other math. No science should contradict other science. Like if you're, right. But we have faith that there is an answer.
We shouldn't
except again, maybe extremes.
We shouldn't be able to both prove something true and false at the same time. That's Like
Yeah.
1 does not equal 0. We know that in math. We can't
Yeah.
prove 1 equals
It
0,
can't.
that it doesn't at the same time.
Yeah. A, not A. Like, you can't do that. That violates like logic. And if you did do that, then everything would be wrong. Or like 1 would equal 2, and you can do whatever you want.
Right. That would be super confusing, super weird.
Yeah.
So, so when I was little learning science, it was like within this frame of determinism. Like we know lots of things, we can determine lots of things. Most of the universe is basically determined. Obviously, humans are biology is a bit complicated, but most of reality is determined. And I realized that, oh, my model of reality, like somewhere deep in my stack, has a like very stable, very boring, very determinable, and
very boring. To me, it's very structured. It feels like a skeleton.
In a good way.
Universe.
But also in a way that's not necessarily true. Like that's something that's like my frame for reality that I should really hopefully be able to question.
I think you should question it. Yeah. This is good. It's like, this is putting stress on your bones. It makes them stronger.
Right.
You do it right. Don't just like break them for no reason, but like stress test them.
Right. And so if I'm like, oh, this is all just the system of science has taught me a great deal. And also it's a system and it's a story.
Yeah.
And hopefully I can run experiments and see for myself.
Dude, that's what science is. Yeah.
Right. Hopefully. But I'm still, there's a lot of my like system of scientific knowledge that is resting on like, this is the chunk of stuff that people have taught me that sort of goes together. And what if like our scientific understanding of the universe was actually like missing a big chunk of information? What a great story. I can't wait to tell that story.
Missing a lot, yeah, for sure. Right. And we even know what some of those chunks look like. So like, for instance, in physics, we have dark matter, right? Which is essentially saying this is a chunk of the universe that we don't get, but it kind of, it looks like this. This is what it looks like. And yeah, like, somebody's going to figure that out. What is it? What does it look like? And they're going to be able to explain it.
So I do take science quite seriously, almost literally, sort of in the way that it can explain things. And also I'm like open to the possibility that like we're going to reform science when we get more knowledge.
Yeah.
Excitingly, for example, optometry thought that the eye had a particular structure, and more recently they've discovered there's like the diagram of the eye, the classic this is a human eyeball, it was missing a couple of details. There's a couple of like films or filaments that are like very thin that are between certain bits. Like we when we did surgery, just kind of cut through them and it didn't notice them. But turns out there's a bunch more on the diagram. That's cool. I didn't know that. This is like, I think this kind of stuff is pretty common with humans, like with biology, because you get like multiple layers of tissues like squashed together and then it becomes one. Right.
So if you look at like packaging or like how most of our stuff works, it's usually just one layer of a thing. Like this is just a piece of plastic, right? Like it's a thin, that's it. My table, for instance, though, I think it's particle wood. So it's like a piece of wood, like a laminate wood. So it's like thin veneer, I mean. So it's like a thin piece of wood, and there's particle wood in the middle, and then so it's like layered. But when you have like your skin and membranes and stuff, like there could be like all these crazy different layers that like stick together.
I mean, when we make like computer chips, we sort of make different layers of
yeah, I was actually thinking computer
like
chips and
film.
Most things are like this, but
that's getting very complicated. Some of the most complicated things we make are computer.
Yeah, because it's really hard to do that. Also the other one is like batteries are like that as well, where they have it's like wafers, right? So like wafers is one of those things that like we make that have all these layers. And you can see it's like a layer of like wafer, then chocolate, wafer, something like vanilla or whatever, right? But even those things, like it's still all the same. Like you don't get
hungry.
Huh?
Daniel's hungry.
No, I just ate. I like food. A lot of my material sciences, like my knowledge of that is tied up in food. because like practically speaking, that's most of my most of my physics and biology and chemistry come, like my practical applications come from food. And so I have like all my intuitions and all my knowledge, I kind of put it into like cooking and making things, and then it's that information stays, so I can still remember it. So even though I learned physics like fucking, I don't know, like 10 years ago by this point, probably longer, but because I use it.
Make an atom.
No, I can't make an atom. I can't even cut an atom. Splitting atoms.
Metaphor doesn't work as well.
Yeah. But like, yeah, like still like keeping a lot of that knowledge alive inside me. Because I use it all the time. Which is a psychotech, actually. So you want to keep knowledge, or you got to use it. Otherwise you forget it. So you got to find something that you got to find things to do that will allow you to integrate all the knowledge that you know. And then keep that alive, and then also build on it. So you run into things, and the thing I like about cooking, sometimes I'll run into things where I'm like, I don't actually know what's going on here. I need to look this up. And then it kind of forces me to learn, and then I'll do things and I think I know, and then I make mistakes. And then that mistake, it like shows, I'm like, wow, there's something fucked up here and I don't know what it is. Anyway, yeah.
All right. So story. We're here to talk about story, right?
Yeah, stories. Yeah, so this is my story. Like this is a story of how I live my life.
You can't just end sentences with "so this is a story" and then think that it fits.
But it is a story.
It is. But there's so many stories. This is a problem that we have in today's age, that there are so many stories.
Well, this is your story. I don't know that
like
lots of stories is a problem.
Particularly with the explosion of information and media, there are just so many stories.
Yeah. Okay, I'll tell you the thing. I think like the media, like especially like culture war stuff, the stories suck. The stories, especially like this like right left economy where they're playing the stories off each other. You know, right now, for people listening in the future, we're dealing with the Roe v. Wade overturning, or potential the Roe v. Wade leak that will potentially have them overturn, which leads into abortion. And so like you get this like abortion story, and it's just like you get two stories, and they're just both trying to ram it down everyone's throat, and
highly consensually.
Huh?
Highly consensually ram it down.
Yeah. Everyone should have the right to their own body, and I'm gonna force and yell at you until you agree with me. Like chill out, person. But whatever it is, you get I only mention the left side because those are the people I hang out with, and so they are the ones that annoy me. If I was hanging out with the right side, they'd annoy me. But yeah, so you get these like terrible stories that are just being pushed down people's throats and like shouted, and then they're playing off each other. So like they've kind of just lost, a lot of this stuff has just lost touch with reality. Like if you were coming at this ex nihilo, you wouldn't be in this. Like these aren't this, like you wouldn't, like you just be like, what is wrong with this person? Why are they?
Right. If we took you out of the 90s and we brought you to today, and you heard some of the arguments and upsetness and stories that were going on, you'd be like, what? How did the world get to here from the 90s?
I don't know. I feel like this kind of stuff is
similar. It was predicted. Definitely, like if you go back to comedy of the 90s and like a couple of movies, when they projected forward, they projected sometimes truthfully and sometimes comically an extreme version of like mild arguments they were having back then.
Was it mild back then? I think it was serious.
It was serious, but they were like few and far between. Like it was less common.
Like people cared less, I guess.
Well, maybe you had one person or a smaller number of people who were advocating for the issues that they were worried about, but now there's like been an amplification of volume.
Yeah, but that's because we have more powerful technology. Like our ability to yell.
But it's not just the technology, it's that there are more people telling that same story.
Yeah, it gets amplified and like more refined.
And if there are enough people telling the same story in a culture, then the culture will shift into including that story a bit more.
Yeah.
For example, the culture of like white picket fence house in America, the American dream.
That suburb.
If enough people tell that story, then enough people will think that that's the way the world is. But actually, I don't know about America so much because I don't live there, but there are a lot of people living in apartments here, not with a white house, white fence. And
yeah.
that's like, there's this different story going on of people live in cities in apartments, and they are working jobs.
So it's interesting because I do think like this, like the suburb story that you mentioned versus contrasted with the reality of people not being able to do that. Like at least here in Toronto, we have that where like the prices are like super high and it's like really hard to get a house. And so like I see a lot of, like for me, like it doesn't really bother me that I live in an apartment. Like I would love to live in a house with a backyard and all that stuff, for sure. But like I don't feel like I have to, and I don't feel like I'm failing because I'm not.
It's also like you could leave the city and go further into the country and possibly own a house that was bigger.
So I really wanted that, but I
could, but like whether you will or won't, it's sort of complicated.
Yeah, circumstances don't necessarily, because a lot of people like they have to work in cities, and then
that's right, particularly given the world we live in. But it's not that we've run out of space, it's that we keep trying to pack ourselves into cities, right? It's not a shortage of land on the earth.
And I would like a better, like we could have a better story, right? Like with apartment buildings, even like if you got like like the bottom floor, just like let's say for everyone, like our whole floor, with like this and like you redid it, like you could have like it would be
I know buildings who have like a rooftop terrace, like a rooftop garden thing, and like it's a communal area that everyone sort of shares and hangs out in.
I've been to that, like some of the places downtown. There was some meetups or whatever, like some of the people from the Effective Ultras, and they live in these like really nice apartments downtown, and they got like chill areas and like work areas, barbecue. Like it's like you're like it's almost like you're living in a house. It's just kind of like cut up and move around. Like you have to take the elevator to somewhere and then go, like you have a little trip that you have to go to the place. And then if you're friends with the people in the building, then
you just have a bigger family.
You have neighbors, right?
So there's this other story of communal living, right? Or and I like it. I like living with people. I happen to live with a bunch of friends, but there's that's like a competing narrative for people's values. Like, is it better to live like this or like that?
And that's the thing, is like I don't think there is an answer to that. Like
well, I would say there's a subjective answer. There's definitely a subjective answer to it.
Well, I think there's like a better question is like what's better for me, or what's
right. That's the subjective answer. Like, or which one do you prefer?
Or which one do you prefer? Which one are you attracted to? Which one you want to try out? Like there's tons of questions you can ask here, and I think if it does come to everyone has to do a thing, then I think we're in trouble.
There's also there's more useful big questions as well, like which stories are compatible with each other. Like if everyone wants to live in a house and live in the city, then the city's got to be really big and flat, and maybe that's like there's a problem.
It's not really a city. That's a suburb.
Right, a really big suburb. Across the continent. Right, but that's kind of difficult. Whereas if we make apartments, then a lot more people can live in density. Then we can deliver them goods and services with greater efficiency because they're all like packed in a little bit. And then we can, if more people want to live there, then we have to build smaller apartments to get the right number of people, or taller apartments to get the right number of people. And then we have this dystopic, like people are living in sardine cans. And so we want them like bigger than sardine cans, but smaller so that they can fit together. And like there's quite an interesting dynamic going on there.
I'd like to see some like interesting apartment stories, actually, now that you mentioned it. Like we have these like white picket fence suburb ones. And, like to me, I hate that. I like the much more like homestead or permaculture stories.
I
Like,
heard of a story of a apartment building in Seattle that everyone had dogs. It was like a dog friendly building, and
mhm,
so everyone who lived in the building had a dog, and everyone who lived in the building took the dog out to the dog park across the street,
mhm.
and so everyone in the building got to chat to the other dog owners and got to chat to the other people in the building, and so there was this incredibly huge communal vibe because everyone knew everyone else.
Yeah, like that sounds amazing.
That's a win for community culture.
I wish they had one for like babies. Everyone in this building needs to have a baby.
Okay, I can see that going terribly as, every baby catches chickenpox in a wave or something like that.
Oh yeah, forever disease.
And also babies grow up, and so every baby suddenly like, oh, you're too old here, or like there's 7-year-olds in with the babies, and like,
Yeah. I'm not saying it's realistic. But like, yeah, like no, but if you had like a thing where it's like, like obviously you don't want babies because then like 2 years later, no, it's a toddler, like you gotta move.
right.
But like, yeah, if you had
it becomes a
like
toddler building,
yeah, like
but also like,
you have to move to the toddler building.
well, what happens if parents have 2 children and they have one toddler and one baby?
One toddler, one baby, then
Oh
they can
no,
go.
we have to live
You
in
go either way because
building.
you have a baby and a toddler. You're the bridge between worlds.
Yeah.
No, but like I meant like for like kids or something, right? Because there
Right.
is something about
There's
like,
elderly living. There are buildings, sort of more like nursing home or retirement living here.
yeah,
Elderly
that's the
living.
cool.
Makes sense. Like,
Yeah,
just you want different things. You prefer a different culture when you're at a different age.
yeah, like that stuff makes sense to me. But maybe I don't know if I would move there when I'm that age. But I get it, and I like that it exists.
Yeah.
But it's just something I want to share, like personal story of my adventures through through parenthood. Is like there are people like certain like people like with kids or in that space, they do respond differently. And like there's this like kind of sort of subculture within our culture of parents.
Like parents
And so,
talk to
like,
parents, sort of thing.
yeah, like I have a baby, so I'm allowed to just talk to random people and
Oh.
like just interact with, like I can hang out with children now, right? Like before that would have been creepy. But if now I got skin in the game, I'm bringing a baby to the thing, like I can just go over to random children and then like engage with them. Which is very scary at first because like I don't know how parents are going to react, but they always react very well. Maybe I shouldn't be saying this. Might be info hazard.
What? Have your own kid and then you can like meet the other people.
Yeah, well, once you kidnap one baby, the rest of them are easier. Because this isn't a champ, but whatever. This is how it is. And so like now there's like all these people that like it's like easy to meet people, but they're all parents, which is now interesting to me, which wouldn't necessarily have been.
I'm gonna name another story, which is something like I don't have a great word for it, but the people will have kids and the people who won't. So
yeah,
like
that's another
people
thing.
who are breeding or the people who are not breeding.
Yeah, what is it? It's the neonatalists versus breeders. So like neonatalists being like people who don't think people should have kids. It's like there's like a person, there's very personality, like there's a kind of person that's
Pretty
like
sure you're thinking the antinatalists.
Antinatalists, sorry.
Like what? No, antinatalists.
Shit, you're right. Antinatalists.
Pronatalists vs antinatalists.
Yeah.
Right. The people who are like, there's maybe the world is too populated. The people who are like, I don't want to have kids because my childhood was terrible. People who are like, well, my partner is not the opposite gender to me, and so I can't have a kid.
No. Okay, so there's a split. It's not exactly like that. So a split of people who are like,
this is a list. This is not a cluster. This is a list of.
No, yeah, you're doing a list, but like some of those people are different sides, right? So there's people who are like kids good, and then people are kids bad. Right. So you have like people who can't have kids or don't want to have kids because they're trauma, like they don't think they're going to be good parents, or people that whatever, I guess they can have kids, same sex or whatever, like, like that kind of stuff, or trans, whatever, like all those things. Like those people are in the those people could very well be in the like kids category.
Right.
Right. And then so it's like that same thing still. Like I have friends that don't have kids, but they're like, you can instantly tell, right? If they're making faces at the baby, then they're like in this category. And then if they're not, they're in the other category.
They're in the pro kid category if they're making faces, like enjoyable faces, like
yeah,
things to the kids.
Yeah, whatever. People do stupid shit when they see a baby, because babies think it's funny, and it's very like enjoyable to make a baby laugh. This is like a great pleasure in life. And so there's people that get that pleasure and people that don't get it.
Or people who know to look for that pleasure, or people who feel rewarded by that pleasure.
Yeah, people are like in that world. And then there's people like that middle and stuff, but they're usually going a direction.
I call this the people who enjoy baby story.
Yeah, well, yeah, I don't know about baby story stuff yet.
Yeah,
because like that one does seem like hit or miss. I think it might just be how I need to get good at saying baby stories. Because also other parents say, and like sometimes they say stories, and I'm like, this is only interesting to you because it's your kid. Like,
right.
This isn't a good story.
Right. Okay. So we've got a lot of stories that we've just pulled up. We got the American dream. We got communal living. We got the having kids. We got the not having kids. Like they're I was trying to say earlier, there are a lot of stories. Hopefully you're starting to believe me. There are a lot of stories.
Oh, I believe you. I just don't believe it's a problem. I believe it's a problem when it's like some people will say stories that are not true. I think that's a problem. Some people will say stories, like some stories are not true. Some stories are really negative and like they might technically be true, but like stop fucking saying those stories. Like I don't care if it's true or not. Just stop doing it.
Well, I'd say another category there, along with like not true or negative stories, is competitive stories. Some stories are competing with other stories, particularly when it comes to like what is the most important story. Like we have to be talking about my politics, or we have to be talking about my religion over your stories and over you and your stuff.
Well, okay, so yeah, this is interesting. Like to me, I like the stories of like God and religion and stuff. Because like I do think those are the most important stories. But it has to be like it's not just about the story, right? It's also about the circumstance and the way you're saying the story and what's going on at the time. And I think, and then also like, is your story a good quality story, right? Just because it's in the realm of important things doesn't make it good. I think we saw that a lot with COVID, where a lot of people are saying stories like COVID was really important. And a lot of people are saying stories about it. And a lot of those stories are terrible and wrong. And I don't care that it's important if what you're doing is bad. You should stop it. And I'd rather people didn't talk about a thing than that they enforced falsehood.
Well, we say politically, always take advantage of a good disaster.
Yeah, never let a
good disaster
go to waste. And I think that's true also, like business and entrepreneurially and all that.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And also like psychologically. Yeah. I think this is true. Never let a good disaster go to waste. But you shouldn't let anything go to waste. Right? Like COVID was multiple years. You shouldn't have let that go to waste.
Yeah. Well, many of my friends during the period of COVID switched to working from home, switched to exercising more, switched to eating healthier. Like you couldn't supplement your diet with restaurants and junk food as much. You had to start eating healthy. I even know someone who was drinking heavily, who very early on like bought to an alcohol shop, bought a bottle of alcohol, brought it home, and like drank half the bottle in the first day, and went like, "Oh, this is a problem. I can't keep drinking."
Yeah.
Like wow. To this particular person, I was like, I'm surprised that you managed to notice that, because they're less self-aware than the rest of the population. But even that person managed to notice the bad habits we can get into when we're stuck locked in at home.
Yeah. And like that's like that's beautiful, right? Like if like you're an alcoholic and like you see this happening and then you take out those years to not do that, like you
Right.
didn't let it go to
I
waste.
know
Like
people who
great.
quit alcohol for COVID. I know people who lost weight. I know people who gained weight. I know people who exercise more. I know people who picked up new hobbies. I know
Yeah.
on net, I know people who are doing way better because of COVID, other than, you know, a couple of people got sick and a couple of people died and a couple of people had businesses collapse. For the most part, people did really well with COVID. In my circle.
People that stay in touch with you.
In my circles, yeah, right. People who stay in touch. Maybe the people whose businesses crashed and died didn't have time to chat to me, but
yeah, I think there's a counterfactual question of like if what would have been alternative, and then there's like selection bias, and there's a lot of things to say like on the whole. Like, so I'm not talking about on the whole how COVID was, but
no,
yeah,
I'm just talking about the bubble of people that I happened to have bumped into enough times during COVID.
yeah.
And people really did struggle as well. Like I struggled in the lockdowns of the like. I remember this beautiful story that came to my mind that the government is trying to control me and we're all trapped. And
Dude,
like I sat with it for a day and then I was like, oh, this is just frustration because I don't want to be locked in. And then I made my peace with it and then I was fine and I was having a great time, you know, just living whatever life I could still live given the constraints of lockdown. But it was because I could process my emotions that I could make peace with it.
And that's the story that you're telling yourself.
Right, but
you can only do it
because I got to a better place in proposal. I propose that it's a good story because I got to the better place.
Well, yeah. Well, what I'm saying is that that's a story, but also there's a story that you only got there because of these other things, and that's a story, and that might be self-limiting or whatnot.
That's true. Yeah,
I like that we're bringing stories into our dynamic, like notes and stories.
So yeah, I was saying earlier, I consider myself more on the shape rotator side. Like I try not to have many stories. I'm like, in fact, in order to be more like other people,
this shape rotator versus incel is a story. And so this is what I mean. Like when
but it feels true to
do this. Fine, it feels true, but when the shape rotators do this and then they take it too seriously, I'm like, dude, this is the fucking word cell thing, right? Like, I think you're a poser. You know what I mean? When people take this seriously, it makes me think they're a poser. But really, they're a word cell pretending to be a shape rotator. Like, let me explain to you how good I am at shape rotation. I'll write many essays on it.
Oh no, what have we done?
Real shape rotators don't need to do that. They just rotate shapes with people, and like that's how you.
And they don't even talk about it. They just shape rotate.
Maybe a little bit, but like, because words are shapes and ideas are shapes, and they're also conveyed through words. But like, like mostly it's showing each other cool shape rotations or whatever, or building something or whatever, right? Like, there's a lot of things you can do.
So I would like to pick up more word selling, like practice skill a bit more, because I feel like I'm on the shape rotation side.
Okay.
And I feel a little out of touch with a whole bunch of people.
Okay, this is resonating with you. I can see that this is important to you.
Well, it's not that important. I'm all for also just doing
it's touching, or it's like vibing with something important, or it's like resonating with something important.
Sure. Yes. Or I have an experience of like a huge chunk of my phenomenological experience feels different to other people's. And that's some story, but it feels like I'm doing something that the main line of what I'm doing is different to other people's. They're like the nuance, the detail, they're like there's an emotion followed by a reaction. That feels almost universal. Like the way in which emotions have reactions, it feels almost like everyone who was in similar circumstance would act in a similar way. Emotion, reaction. But the way in which I know, there's something interesting.
Level of meta awareness of a relationship,
right? So it feels like my meta awareness is very different to other people's meta awarenesses, but my personal, like the content is universally similar.
I agree. I think that we're here and doing psychotech and that we think it's a good idea, and like we're taking this seriously and doing it.
Oh no, be careful! You're getting into our story as the story. That has to remain around us. You can't just pull it in front of us. We can't observe that.
What?
We can, but like be aware, we're just like we're going very like meta-ish.
Yeah. So
Go
this
ahead.
is yeah. So we call this, like, I do this with my friend. Like, we did this on mushrooms and everything. It's amazing. We call it qualia braiding.
While
So
you're
you're
upgrading,
no qualia braiding.
braiding.
So we're taking these different he calls them manifolds. So he has like a little different way of seeing things. So we're taking like these different
Language.
manifolds and interweaving them together,
Mhm.
which I realize people are not going to understand what I'm talking about.
Right, so we're observing one story, and we're observing another story, and we weave them together.
Yeah. And so like this moment is like a constant like interwoven of various stories.
Right, but the stories are not just word-based stories; they're like
The
shapes.
real things.
They're
The
real
real things.
shapes in the world, and there's
Yeah.
no separation between the words of the story and the shape of the world. There's just the words
Well, the
solidly.
words act as handles. Like, I think the way
Yeah.
we're doing it now, the words are acting as handles.
Right.
And I've even done it, like you can even do it sometimes where you're just saying a word and then you're saying another word. And like there's not a conversation going, but it's just like a shared experience. And then the words are sort of like that thing, that thing, that thing.
Mhm.
That's my favorite. But that takes like, you gotta have like good, like be in the same reality as the other person to be able to do that.
Is it like this is a game or a practice to do with a group of people? So I might say a word like apple, and then Daniel's turn to say some kind of word. Daniel might
Fruit.
right, and
This is like association. Yeah.
I internally wouldn't be saying this out loud, but I can see that there's apple is connected to fruit because apple's a fruit, and I might go like hear the word fruit, and it's my turn again to say a word, and I might say freedom because it it begins with F or something, I don't know, and Daniel's turn to say another thing. Like that's something that was on my mind that kind of popped in, like I don't know.
Yeah. It's interesting. I haven't played this game in a long time, actually. I don't necessarily want to play it now because I feel like it's not going to make good content.
Yeah, it's a game. In 2 minutes it'll beat up or not. Anyway,
fun.
fun. You said fun. Nice. Okay. Strawberries.
Yummy.
Just this whole thing. It's great. Thank you.
Yeah, just this whole thing.
So we've got this like here I am sitting in my perspective on all the words, right? So I was like, Daniel's like, say fun, and I'm like, oh, I'll bring back the fruit game. That was funny. And then Daniel's like, oh, I'll lean in and have this like the flavor of the fruit is yummy. Like, okay.
Yeah.
But he could have had an entirely different version of that experience. He could have gone
Yeah.
like, I don't know, I just decided strawberries were yummy.
Yeah. But that's the thing is like, I think there's all these things. Okay, so there's all these different places you can go, like when you're in this, and this is also life, right? Like when you're having conversation with people, like sometimes the conversation gets very narrow and you feel trapped on tracks, like on rails. But like when you're good, like I find this like this is like sort of like pops out with like a good date. Like when you go on a good date, it's not that you have a good conversation, it's that the experience is good. And like on a good date, like it's not even like the conversation doesn't even necessarily like go anywhere or do anything. It's just that you're just like having these shared experiences together, and you're like vibing and on the same place and doing, like in the same like you're like in the same space doing the same, but maybe doing different things, but doing it together well. Yeah, and often the conversation is just like doesn't even necessarily make sense to people outside, right? Like you could have like multiple threads going. And it's like kids do this a lot, I think. It's only like when we get older we learn how to concentrate on things.
There was some story you got going there, but yeah.
Nothing wrong with concentration. I think that's also valuable, but it's like both these things are valuable. It's like awareness versus concentration.
Okay, so wait, I pulled us away, but you were going meta on the psychotech story, right? What were you going to say? You were talking about weaving stories, but
yeah, so yeah, and we're still talking about weaving stories, and we're still weaving the stories together, like in this moment.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is a big psychotech thing. What was I saying? I don't know. Like, what are you interested in? Like, what's alive? As the Stoa would say. I feel like the Stoa's motto should be "What's alive."
Interesting.
Well, I don't know what's alive for you. We could do a bit.
Yeah, we're gonna be Three Stooges, or was it Three?
Oh my god, we should totally that would be hilarious. Like that is a skit. Like the Three Stooges, like I don't know what's alive.
I have my head in my hands because you're right, and it would be like a terrible meme that our entire in group would get, and I would be disappointed and ashamed that it would work so well, and it would work so well.
Yeah, I'm curious about this disappointment and shame. Like, what's?
I think I'm not ironically sincere enough.
Like you're too sincere and not enough irony. Or
yeah. I'm a little too sincere in this moment, and I need more irony to be able to accept the like ironic sincerity.
Yeah. I feel like being ironic makes, like in this way, not how it's normally used. It makes you better at this because it keeps everything like a little bit lighter and easier to navigate. And I find things like can get heavy and then bogged down and grindy. And if you're happy, like this is a big thing when like the entrepreneurial side, like do what makes you happy, because you can do that way more than everyone else. Like if you find something that like you can just do that all day, like you can like, and you're not going to get burnt out because it makes you happy.
And so you uniquely know what that is better than other people can know it for you or do it for you.
Yeah. And you just have like this comparative advantage that just other people can't, like they just can't keep up with, right? Like you see this with comedians and stuff. Like the really good comedians, like they're really good at their stuff because they love it. They think it's the funniest thing, and they do it all the time.
Right. So we're weaving a story here as psychotechnologists in psychotechnology. You know what we haven't covered? We haven't covered the like what it's like inside a story and the effects of being inside a story. Because often people aren't having a good time in their lives, partly due to some story that they're carrying along. Like they secretly think that they're a bad person, and so they spend a lot of time and mental energy keeping up some sort of ruse and like trying to prove they're a good person, but they secretly think they're a bad person. And so, owing to some story that they have buried a bit because it would be scary to check, they're sort of avoiding finding out the answer if they're a good or a bad person.
Yeah, give me 1 second. You keep talking. I gotta just pull something from the oven.
Sure. And so stories in psychotech, like how do we do psychotechnologies on stories? One of the details is to start checking what are the stories that you're telling. Like what are the stories that you are in your mind, like this is definitely true for me. Like, you know, the one I have about wordcel and shape rotators, I'm definitely more of a shape rotators. I want to try to be more of wordcel. And that just it doesn't feel like a story. It feels true enough that I'm like, that's true. And because of it, I'm guiding myself to wordcels. But if it was like, I'm part of the generation that is losing at the world, or I am part of society that society doesn't like. If I'm telling one of those stories, I'm like beating myself up over the problem, but potentially, unless I really like being a rebel or something.
Yeah, those stories can be really toxic for sure.
Right.
I hate those stories. Yeah.
The extension from story to like how it makes me act, that can be really interesting. Like because of the story, my behavior will change. Other people's behavior around me will change because I'm making the story.
You will elicit certain reactions from people and
right. because if I think I'm the rebel, I'm covering myself in the tattoos, and then I'm like being grumpy at people because they look at me and they like are disgusted by my tattoos, so I just give them more angry looks. Like suddenly my story has taken life and is truly the way I live. So it's very important to be paying attention.
One is like, it's hard to get allies if you're always the rebel.
Right.
Like you can't get any allies.
Right. And so very important to pay attention to what stories are we telling. And definitely I would say, am I enjoying the stories I'm telling? That's very important too.
Yeah, so this is a weird one because oh, sorry, we finished?
Go ahead.
Okay, yeah. Because there is, like, I do see people say stories like this and they enjoy telling the story, and they enjoy like being that, like, oh, I'm the rebel and nobody likes me and I'm forever, like they feel good about that identity. And like they feel good saying it, but they hate living it.
So one I find kind of interesting is the outrage story, right? I enjoy telling stories of being outraged or like, how dare that person treat me this way?
Yeah.
Because it's strong and emotive, and that like it's very hooky because it's got that volume in it. But it also it's kind of dangerous because I'm telling a negative story, like I'm complaining about something.
Yeah, like I'm offended, like the I'm offended story. Or the other one is it's it's just a matter of respect. Like anyone that doesn't do this thing that I want them to do is being disrespectful.
There's also like better than thou as a story. I am better than thou.
Yeah.
And then it becomes important to like keep an eye on
that one grates me too much. Yeah. That one grates me too much. If that one's explicit, like I just won't hang out with the person.
There's a book from around the 60s or 70s by a guy named Eric Berne, and the book was
I call them out right away, and then if they don't go for it, then like depending on how that goes, then
the book was called Games People Play, and it was the start of the psychological field of transactional analysis. And the proposal is that particularly there's a cool diagram of parent, child, and adult, but particularly in transactional analysis is sometimes people lean into one of the parent or child or another dynamic, like I've been bad, you should punish me, in order to get attention from the other person. People play like games with each other that like sort of relationship games, but they're like sometimes they're really shitty games. Like for example, the game of I don't really like you, you should chase after me, right?
Yeah,
that's that can be like, I might be buried in my stuff around causing this game on you, but the game is caused on you, and then you have to like come chase after me if you actually want me. And then I'm like, maybe I'm like, I'm unlovable, you have to prove that I am lovable, and so you have to try extra hard to really prove I'm lovable. And the thing about this, I said a moment ago, like pay attention to the stories that you're telling, but over here I'd be like, make sure the games you're playing are the games you want to be playing. Like stop. There's this line, this is I'm gonna weave in one more thing. There's this line on Reddit in lots of different communities, which is play shitty games, win shitty prizes. It makes me laugh, right? But it's like there's this game thing here, like, oh, if you're playing shitty games, you're gonna have shitty things happen. Like you play the I'm unlovable, people might just leave you and prove you.
No, people would be like, okay, yeah, you seem like an intelligent person who knows what's going on, so I guess that's true.
Yep. See ya. I had it happen once. I was like starting to date someone, and I was like, I'm not in a good place right now, and they were like, okay, bye. And they like 3 days in, 4 days in, they're like, no thanks. And like it was useful for them at the time to do that, and I think it was useful for me at the time. And also, had they stayed, I would have dropped the story fairly quickly. But yeah, these things happen.
Yeah, that's a real thing I've noticed. Like flirting and stuff is like, for me, it's like everything happens in the first like 10 seconds. Like the whole relationship is just what it is like that 10 seconds, because it's like you see each other, you size each other up, and then you make decisions, and like you're kind of like, those decisions are kind of, I mean, for me, a lot of it is just panic because like, oh, it's a pretty lady like talking to me.
No, that's a terrible story. Stop telling yourself that story. That's really like
No, that story actually works really well because
oh.
it's first off, it's very true, and second, and second off, it like paints everyone in a pretty good light, right?
Right,
Because
because they're
like,
always the pretty people talking to you.
yeah, like they're a pretty person. I'm acknowledging that they're pretty, so like they just got complimented, so they're they're happy with me, and so like that kind of buys me a little bit more time to like calm down, and it buys me also a lot of like leeway because when I do things, it's like, oh, like you're panicking a little bit. Like, let me be nice to you.
So interesting, and also like, oh man,
Yeah.
what a mess.
Like being honest and truthful is super powerful.
Well, the crazy thing is that like to be more enlightened would be to treat everyone as the beautiful people, which would mean in order for me to do that,
Yeah. Yeah.
through this story, I have to be more of a wreck. I have to be just a complete, total, like gibbering, like slightly more confused. Like I don't know what I'm going to do next. Like who is this person? I should say something useful.
No.
I need to be more there in order to that I'm meeting the king, right? Because if every person I meet is the king, I need to be like successfully humbled myself in order to have an appropriate.
Yeah, but that's
like
not what you
uprising.
think.
It's like when I describe it like this, it seems unhealthy, but like better than
Yeah.
I'm the king and everyone else is my inferior, and I should treat them with
No, we're both kings. This is a high tension scenario.
right, right. Well, that's super interesting.
That's usually how I like to go. It's
like
we're both strong, capable people
like,
interacting.
raise swords raised and be like, "Oh, we got to fight about this one." Like, there's some tension there. Like, oh,
Uh,
it'll wake both of us up if we're both kings.
yeah. So for me, it's like, yeah, it's like that. But like, so the first time maybe you're doing that, it's like high tension scenario because like you really should see people as potentially dangerous because they are.
Hmm.
Right? Like anyone you meet could kill you.
Anyone you meet could change your life.
Or they could change your life, yeah. And
Right.
it could be good, it could be bad, it could be wonder, or it could be like whatever. Like all the dimensions exist all at the same time every time you interact with someone. So yeah, like I'm not surprised people have social anxiety.
Like, another way to think of this is like everyone is a wizard, and you are like, but like a dodgy wizard. Like a friend of mine was saying this to me. I'm a wizard, but it's like sometimes I wave my magic wand and like amazing things happened, and I'm surprised because other times I wave my wand and like garbage appears everywhere. Like, oh shit, what have I done? Like, I'm a wizard, but quite a bad wizard, right? But like everyone you meet is like that. They're regularly waving their wand at reality and like causing it to take shape in one way or another. And like sometimes it works really well, and other times like garbage is everywhere, and like what the fuck? I gotta clean this up now. Like wave the wand again, and like it gets worse rather than getting better.
Yeah. I mean, it's crazy. Like I met this girl. Oh, I didn't tell you. I met this girl. Oh no, I did tell you. And she was like,
gonna identify them very well, but yes.
No, I can't identify her because it's actually dangerous for her.
Privacy thing, you know.
No, it's not just privacy. It's like actually legitimately dangerous if I mention her name. But like it's like escalating. So she came into the party and she's like, oh, I don't want to like mess things up because like, I come in places and then sometimes like I like blow things up and like shit gets nuts, right? And she didn't want to do that because whatever excuse she had. And like to me, I'm like, oh, like this is actually interesting. Like now, like I'm interested in what's going on here.
You got that drama thing, yesterday, last conversation we were talking about.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, I let go of drama. See, you went like, oh, drama. I want to go towards that.
No. It's to me, it's not about the drama. It's about the power. Like I like that power.
Okay.
And someone who does that to me, like it's not just like it's not that she could do it. It's that
she's implying a bunch of power that she's concerned about.
Yeah, she knows she has the power. She's not hiding it. Like she's very open and honest and straightforward and sharing it, and then like putting it out. And then so there's like a little back and forth because like I like when people do that, like that's also a minute. It could potentially be a manipulative tactic where they're doing that just to get their attention. There's nothing there, or the thing that's there is very weak. And so like playing that game of like of like not being like a simp and not being like a aloof, you know, like where it's you're like, you know, like a proper human who's also powerful and also, you know, a little bit suspicious of things and a little bit open-minded, you know. Yeah, like the kind of person that you want to be.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what my point was, but
Everyone's a wizard, right? She's very powerful.
Yeah,
Got the,
yeah,
like,
and then it turned out she was
power.
actually really good at shit. Like, yeah, she was actually really good at stuff. So that was fun.
Yeah, very interesting. The other way that I've heard this talked about, the story thing talked about, is the Book of Life, right? So there's like, you imagine, I'm gonna go like this, right? This magical book that like everything in reality is written in the book as it's happening, right?
Mhm.
And sometimes like we can use our magical powers and we can see what's going to happen. We can sort of open the book and like predict what's going to happen. The ability of prophecy, as you sometimes call it. We can see what's going to happen soon or in the distant future. Like, will humans survive climate change? That's like, what do I think today about when I look in the book, right? So sometimes we can sort of open the book and look into the future, and other times we can like, and then because we're like, oh no, humans aren't going to survive climate change, I better start doing something about that, right? I actually have the choice to change the future based on how I predict the future, which is super interesting, right?
Right.
So there's two skills. One is reading the Book of Life, and the other is then like starting to write in the Book of Life. I can be like, and then Elliot started research on climate change in order that the future would be different, because like we actually have, talking about wizards and magical powers, like the ability, we're in Storyland, right? Everything is a story, including these. Like, we have an amazing ability to write in the Book of Life if we want to.
Yeah.
But sometimes we do the thing where we're reading the Book of Life. Like she said, I don't want to change anything. I don't want to walk in here because I might screw everything up, right? So
Yeah. She didn't want to like drop bomb and just blow up everything. Yeah.
right, but she was writing some shitty story in the book as it is. That's not how it happened.
Yeah. That's funny. Yeah.
And then blocking herself from like her true power and
Yeah.
her potential to like create great things because she was
Yeah.
writing some shitty story in the book.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's really funny. It is interesting because like I did hear a bunch of her stories and like see some of the way, like the way she was interacting. And it's interesting because her like, at least like the way she was saying it, like I actually don't like, yeah, obviously I don't know everything about her, but like a lot of like the stuff, like she was blowing stuff up, but you know, if you were looking at it from like a counterfactual system perspective, like I think she's not looking at it from a systems perspective, right? She's walking into like a place where shit is not great. She's making shit a little bit better, and in the meantime creating all this chaos and then like leaving.
Well, like
And
imagine if you were like in an ice palace and you had like a glowing red but hot ball of magma, and you were like, where do I put this? Like everywhere you move it, you're like, ah, it's too hot. Oh, put it over there. Like, like things just start melting around you.
Yeah.
Like that's kind of sometimes what it's like to realize how powerful we are as humans. Like, there's just too much of me and I don't know where to put it.
Yeah. Yeah. Like that's a real thing, for sure.
Particularly, I mean, I feel this very much with attention. Like, I have too much attention to, like, I have to start putting someone new, and then you're going to feel some intensity because I'm paying attention to you. And then like there's too much going on for me that I have to start sharing me around in order to like even feel calm.
Sorry, I missed that. Yeah, I missed the transition.
I have too much attention.
Yeah.
Like, and attention is like light, right? It's observation, it's experience, it's this brightness that starts to melt the ice of my frozen personality if I pay attention to it, right? And I have too much, and then I have to start like trying to spread it around, or like give it to you and like try it over there and like do something in the world that actually uses my energy. Otherwise I'm like, there's too much here, it's too uncomfortable.
Oh, that's interesting.
This is some story I got.
Explore, yeah. I don't know if you want to explore this on stream or off, but because this is yeah, like energy buildup, right? Like we've done this before.
Yes.
So if the energy is building up too much inside you, it's really, that means like it's I mean, like let's say it's a chakra situation, then there's a blocked chakra, or else it would flow nicely.
No, I actually just think that there's too much energy in the universe. Like, reality is a little bit fundamental suffering. Like there's always a little bit too much here or there. That's just the way it
Like
is.
on like, how could there be too much energy in the universe?
Because
Like, or it's like concentrated, like it's concentrated, like it's not distributed in a effective manner.
so it's
Like
not
to me,
quite
there's never too much energy because
yeah.
like there's also not enough energy.
It's not quite that there's too much, it's that there is
Properly.
the separation created in a duality, like the separation of self, like I'm the one over here, creates this rift which has extra energy in it, which then needs to go somewhere,
Yeah.
which
So,
then has to
no, just stop doing that. Just go non-dual.
right. But
it's a lot easier.
I'm too much of a habitual system that creates dualities all the time.
So stop doing it.
I wish I knew how, but that's a long like journey to enlightenment.
No, you just stop doing it.
If you're not doing it at all, then you're probably deluding yourself, which is another story. But you know,
No, but the thing is, like, it's like you still get like you don't have to go full non-dual to like get any results.
oh yeah,
right?
I have definitely a reduced suffering, but very little suffering. But I still feel that like there's just kind of too much energy around sometimes.
We should do an episode on non-dual because I'm pretty sure I'm non-dual most of the time.
Yeah.
And the energy evens out much nicer.
Yeah, I'm keen to do that episode. Save it for maybe next time. Non-duality.
Yeah. Shinzen Young, I learned this one from Shinzen Young. Not like personally, just like from his stuff on the internet. Because like, yeah, it's just easier. Like it's like more parsimonious, like when you're not like constantly splitting yourself. I still do sometimes because you like I think you still need to. Like he claims we'll do this another time. I have a whole theory on this. Yeah.
Final thoughts on stories. I think my final thoughts would be like, make sure you're enjoying the stories you're in, or pick better stories. Or also sometimes you got to run a story into the ground. Like you got to get tired of it before you're ready to put it down.
Yeah. I mean, like, whatever. Like if that's what you're doing, fine. To me, I would say I think in our circles, or like maybe not exactly our circles, but like at least adjacent. Like I know Monastic Academy tends to,
let's call it the psychotechnologists. Among the psychotechnologists, there are those that tend to be disrespectful, I would say. Not disrespectful, but tend to like be very adamant about like not using stories and not creating stories, which I find, which is a story. And as far as stories go, I think there is definitely some truth to it. But like stories are stories. And I do think like it's like for me, for my journey, like there was a time where I was doing no stories, or like at least attempting to. Mm-hmm. And that's actually really helpful because you're going to see reality. But I do think that stories convey massive amounts of information, and they're extremely useful for interacting with other people, and especially getting like group cohesion. And so for me, I think that's where most of the value of stories go. And the other one is exploring new worlds or new places. So sometimes people come up with like a new concept or new like reality. Like you see this a lot in fiction, right? Where I love the world building aspects of fiction. Like that's the thing that brings me into it. Until I found until I found people building worlds and then not populating it. And then I realized, oh, this is actually incredibly boring. And what's interesting is the stories in these worlds. But it's also not just the stories, it's the worlds and like I guess the shape rotations, and, as you would say. And so stories, this is a ramble, it's not really a story. I wish I could give like a nice coherent stories, but I don't think I can, because I think stories themselves, like to say a story about story would have it would have to exist beyond itself, which it doesn't. I think
but it does have
a like very powerful psychotechnology tool.
Yeah.
And one really worth keeping an eye on, because if you're not keeping an eye on it, at least, then maybe someone else is pulling the strings of your story.
Yeah, I would say be careful. Yeah, like we were saying, like be careful when somebody says a story, and if it doesn't resonate with you, or like I think a lot of like the rationalists tend to, they'll just accept stories because like who gives a shit. But like that stuff accumulates over time, and if it's going the wrong direction, which to be in that case would be like not towards truth or helpfulness or something, like you got to nip that stuff in the bud, and you got to say. And then it's pretty amazing what happens in group situations when you have good stories that you all agree on. Like those are good dynamics. And they evolve also. Like any story that's static, that's still there from like whatever, like 6 weeks ago.
Yeah, how long? That's a good question. For you, how long does it seem like stories last?
The stories evolve over time.
Yes, of course.
So like I've been doing this like story with like my friend, and it gets fleshed out and it gets changed, and it's like a living story. Like the story should feel alive. This is what I think the measurement is. If the stories feel like dead stories, and I think circling is like really good for like dropping that or noticing it, but like dead stories just take up like they just weight. Like you're carrying around garbage. And like you can't necessarily call it garbage because the stories are often tied up in things, and not all the story is garbage. But if the story is heavy, just don't do it. I don't know how else to say it. Like you have to figure out how, right? Like that's a big part of it. But like alive stories make you feel alive. Dead stories weigh you down. And this is a big thing, is be okay with not having a story. Like it's okay to not know what's going on. Most of your life, most things you won't know what's going on. And that's actually a really good story, right? Like the Socrates story, right?
Well, I would say that being lost and also not knowing is sort of a good place to then discover the stories.
Yeah, or not. Like you can go through life without discovering story. Like you can do a lot of things without knowing stories. Like it's fine. Like what's gonna happen? I don't know. What are we doing? I don't know. Why are we doing it? I don't know. Are things going well or not?